Hello there. In this video I'm going to show you how you can use an Enneper curve object in Fluid Designer, jewellery design object that we've created to make your own personalised ring. So if you start Jewellery Designer up, the first thing to do is to find the rings folder, and if I just scroll down the rings folder, you see there are lots and lots of objects here, and most, not quite all, but most of these objects can be used in a similar fashion to how I'm going to show you the creation of this Enneper curve ring. So first of all, I'm going to look for the object I want. So it's this one I'm going to use. So it's an Enneper curve ring which is currently set up to be a 15mm diameter in the center. So if I just, I'm just going to pull this panel down a bit over here so you can see the objects a bit better. So we've got this Enneper curve ring object, which is a curve at the moment, and we've got an inner diameter, a default inner diameter. I'm just holding down the center mouse button there and rocking the mouse. So that gives me an inner diameter, a default inner diameter of 15mm. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is to actually change that. So I'm going to restrict the view of it and restrict the selection of it. That's what the arrow does. And we're going to choose a different ring size. And I'm going to use UK size K+, so I switch on the view and switch on the selection of it, so now I can click on it. If I don't have that highlighted, I can't select the object. As you can see, I'm clicking there. You do need to have both of these in view. Now you can now see that the ring is not the right size there. The curve is going through the middle of the ring, so in other words, the inner diameter of the ring, if I go to view and top, the inner diameter of the ring is now smaller than the setting here, the size K+ 16.1mm setting. So what I need to do is I need to click on the object itself, and if we go over to the properties panel, in the modifiers there are 3 modifiers set here, and the bottom one says set the ring size. Now it was set at the inner diameter, that's this one here that we've switched off. So we need to change this object here for the ring size to be our UK K+ size. So if I click in here and I just scroll in the center mouse button, scrolling down, I'm looking for UK K+, and then I click on that object there. Now when you do that, you don't always get the situation that we appear to have got here, that the ring fits exactly. Sometimes it might just be on the inside and you might need to edit it. I'll just show you what I mean by that. If I press the tab key on the keyboard and go into edit mode, and if I just scroll in and zoom in, now you can see here that the bottom of the ring is in line with the red line there, which is the x-axis, and that's what we need. If I just move this, if I just offset it, you'll see that my ring is no longer set up so the internal diameter is 16.1mm. It's not aligned with the outside of this object here. So you do need to adjust that. So if it's not touching the red line at the bottom here, you do need to change that. So just keep checking that when you're working with ring objects. Now, what are the other modifiers we've got here? Well, if we look at set the columns, it says 3. Well, if I reduce the count down to 1, you can see that's what the columns are. Columns are going around the ring. So there's our default pattern. That's the Enneper curve pattern that we're using here to create this ring. And by using an array modifier, that's an array modifier, this one here, we've set this up for you so that all you need to do is to change the count. Now, the pattern that you finish up with here will depend upon the number of objects that you replicate. So in this case we've got 4 of them, and it will also depend upon this value here. Now it's set at 0.8 at the moment. If I click to the left of it, I can change the value down, and as you see, as I change it down, the overlap changes and the pattern changes. So you can customize this and get the ring style that you want. Now you do need to be a little bit careful here. What you don't want is rings exactly overlapping on top of other rings. because that will cause problems in printing. So you always need to be careful with the count here. You've got a gap here at the moment, so the overlap will be okay. So that ring would in fact print. But again, what you've got to do is look at the pattern, and you'll see that we've got two different patterns here. We've got a pattern there, which is the same as that pattern, which is the same as that pattern. But where we get an overlap, you notice you've got a different pattern. And that's to do with this relative offset and the count. Now, if you're happy with that pattern, and I think that looks quite good, you could actually just export that as an OBJ file and print it. So you could set it as a relative offset 0.9 and a count of 4, and that is a perfectly printable object now. Now in this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just open up the ring, so I've got this little bit of a gap at the bottom, and I'm going to say that that's the ring that I'm going to print. So remember that when you're using Fluid Designer, you don't actually want to go to File and Save. We always go to File and Export it as a wavefront object, and I'm going to export it to the desktop. And so it's my Enneper ring. Now it's not 15 millimeters. I've forgotten what size I set it to now actually. Let me just cancel and go back. What size is that? 16.1 is what I want. So File and Export. So I want a 16.01 millimeter ring. So I export that object, and that's once it's gone through Netfab, that's basically a file that will print as a ring. Now, if we go back to the opening screen, you'll notice this ring is slightly different in that it's thinner at the bottom here. Okay, so if we wanted to actually do that with our Enneper curve, then what we've got to consider is that in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to scale this bit of the ring, the bottom bit of the ring, and make it thinner. Now at the moment, the thickness of this ring, if we look at the curve data, it's got a cross-sectional diameter of 1 millimeter. Now that will 3D print, that'll be okay, but if we thin this out and if we go below 1 millimeter, certainly if we go below 0.8 millimeters, we're going to have some real problems in 3D printing. So if you're going to thin this out at the bottom here, it's a good idea to change the cross-section, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the cross-section to 1.5 millimeters. So the cross-section diameter round is 1.5 millimeters, and as you can see, that sort of bulks up the ring. Now when you do that, you've always got to watch out for whether or not the ring is on the inside of this 16.1 millimeter UK case size, and it doesn't look like it's right at the moment. So if I look view from the top, and I'll just press the home button, you can see that my ring is not aligned properly anymore now that I've changed the thickness. So we need to do that first of all. So we press the tab key, sorry, we need to highlight the ring itself, not the curve. Press the tab key, and if you see there the red line, that's the x-axis. My ring is below it at the moment. So I just scroll in with the center mouse button. Now the snap is on, so if I drag this, it will move up by 1 millimeter, so it'll move way above the red line. I want it to touch the red line. So switch the snap off for the moment and just drag it up until you can just see the red line, the x-axis there. And then you can switch the snap back on and scroll out with the center mouse button. And if I press the tab key to come out of edit mode now, you'll see that my ring is aligned again with that curve. That's my UK size K curve. So that's sized the ring again properly. Now, in order to get this effect of thinning out the ring here, we can't do that while the ring is still a curve. At the moment this is a curve. This is indicating the fact that it's a curve here in the properties panel. If we look in the outliner window, it says Enneper curve ring, and this little icon here indicates that it's a curve as well. we do need to change this to a mesh. Now once we change this to a mesh, we won't be able to change the pattern anymore, or this gap anymore, or the 1.5 millimeters anymore, or at least not so easily. So you need to be happy that that's the shape that you want before you go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh. And notice it changes to a white shape now. Now if I view from the front the ring, what I want to do now is I want to rotate this in the X, the Y and the Z dimensions before I flatten it at the bottom there, or taper it at the bottom. So if I press the R key on the keyboard, I press the R key on the keyboard and then X to rotate it in the X, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. So that's the first rotation. And then if I press R on the keyboard to rotate, and Y, and this time I'm going to rotate it by moving the mouse. Now the snap is on, so what I really want is the gap here to be the same on both sides. So if I just switch off the snap, and if I do rotate and Y again, I've got better control with the snap off. So that's just aligning it so the distance there on each side of the Y of the Z axis is the same. So that's alright, I can switch the snap back on now. And finally I want to rotate it in the Z 90. So it's rotate X, Y and Z. So that just gives me a side-on view of my ring. And essentially now I want to thin out the bottom part of this ring, and the way we can do that is we press the tab key to go into edit mode, and I want B on the keyboard for border select or box select, and I select the bottom of this, and I want to scale it, but I only want to scale it in the X direction, the red arrow direction. So I press S on the keyboard. Now there's a lot of processing required here, so you do have to wait. And what you want to wait for is look in the toolbar at the top of the screen there, and you should see X, Y and Z appear, saying that you can scale it in the X, Y and Z directions, but we only want to scale it in the X direction. So yeah, it's just appeared at the top now. So if we press S on the keyboard and limit it to scaling in the X direction, if you look in the top of the screen there, you'll see that that changes, and we've just got an X at the top. Now I'm moving the mouse there, causing problems. It's not a good idea to move the mouse when you're doing this, but you do need to change the proportional editing. That's the circle in the center of the screen, and we do that by scrolling the center mouse button towards you, and that will affect the editing of the top, as you can see, part of the ring. Now this ring thickness at the moment is 1.5 millimeters. We don't really want to go below 1 millimeter, so the scale for the proportional editing I'm going to use is 2/3 or 66%, or in decimal terms 0.66. So I'm going to type 0.66, and that will appear at the top of the screen. If you look, it says scale 0.66 along the X proportional size. So it's thinned out the ring at the bottom, and if you just scroll the center mouse button, you can see that it does have an effect at the top of the ring as well if you make the proportional circle too big. So I'm just going to reduce it down to there. That looks okay to me, and then click the left mouse button, and then if we press the tab key to come out of edit mode, you can see the effect that that's had on the ring. And that's it now. That's my finished ring. Now if we actually zoom in, if you measure this should be, you won't be able to see it probably on the screen so easily, but yeah, that's 1.5 millimeters if you look carefully. But if we go down to the bottom here, you'll notice that with the proportional editing this is thinned out, and that's, well, it's about 1.2, 1.3 millimeters, so it's not too bad. We could have probably gone with the proportional editing a bit further and made it a bit slimmer at the bottom if we'd have wanted to. But that's okay. So to print that one, you need to go to File and Export again, go to Wavefront Object, go to the desktop. So it's an Enneper curve ring, and it's slim at the bottom. So you export that object, and after Netfab Basic, that's essentially your printable file. So that's how you can create a couple of different types of Enneper curve rings. And do remember, let me just go to File and New and restart it. In the rings window here, most of these objects here can be dragged and dropped, and they can be manipulated in the same way as the Enneper curve there. Alright, so you just choose an object that you want to make a ring out of, and drag and drop it onto the screen and modify it in the way that I've just shown you. Okay, so that's the end of this video. Thank you.